Hi everyone, I'm so excited to introduce you to Kathleen Rousseau, who is a descendant of Sarah and James Rousseau, and she comes from Albert's line. Albert is the younger child, the youngest son. So they had 4 kids. They had Marianne, then Sarah Elizabeth, who me and my husband come from, and then Jimmy, or John James Jr., if you will, and then Albert. And so she comes from Albert's line, and she has some really cool things to say. She's excited to be part of the project, and like many of the family historians that I've spoken to, just looking for a way to get the information preserved and shared in a positive way, so we're not all trying to scramble at some point in the future, and pieces have gone missing, and books have gone missing, or books are no longer relevant. So to digitize the project, digitize the history, and make it more accessible for future generations is also one of her goals. And I'm really glad that I was able to have this conversation with her, and I hope you enjoy it as well. Don't forget to check out the webpage at janellemolony.com/Rousseau and participate with us in the conversation. Send your pictures, send your notes and your comments. Check out what's happening in the family history page at Rousseau Project on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks.
So it's so nice to meet you, Kathleen.
Yeah, it's fun, huh?
Yeah, I wanted to give you a chance to explain what got you interested in the Rousseau journey. I mean, there is like this big thing, but how are you connected to the family story?
Albert Miller, who was I think the youngest son on the trip, was my great grandfather, I believe. Yes, great grandfather. And we received the diary from, I think it was your Uncle Richard, probably, I want to say in the late 70s, early 80s, maybe, when I think one of the Curtis family transcribed it at that time. Yeah. So I saw it years ago, and then, I found it very interesting. And then when my kids grew up, when they did the California history, they did reports on it. And then when we traveled, we, stopped at some of the sites, and it's just, a real interesting story, and, part of our family history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, part of our family history.
Yeah. Hey, so does your family have the original diary?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm the last of this line, because I have one brother but he doesn't have any kids. So no more Rousseaus.
Yeah, we were talking about having that one person in each generation that is holding it all together and preserving.
Right.
So I'm really glad to have more people helping to at least solidify and get to the next step in this process.
Right.
That's one of my biggest hopes, is that when those people start to Google and they even want to try and find something, they will get to the page. They will get to the Rousseau Project, or on social media at Rousseau Project, and they will say, oh, here we go. And it's collected. So Kathleen, how did you hear about Rousseau Project? How did you hear about it?
I just stumbled on I guess it was Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because once in a while I look up some of the Rousseau history just to see if there's anything new. Because I did find there was a woman, because you mentioned that woman, Lane or something. Her last name's Lane. She sent me a bunch of information last year, and about the Rousseau family. She's done a lot of history, and she's just a family friend. But she has a lot of information.
Yeah, but she's not part of the family.
No, she's not. And so she gave me a bunch of information. She gave me information about a professor at Montana State that's on the other side. It's Mr. Rousseau's, Albert Rousseau's wife's sister's family. So she has a bunch of information on that.
So you said you had some trinkets and such. I just have my picture of Grandma, who she looks nothing like me, and thankfully so
your line comes from the daughter, so probably maybe there's more information there. The son's usually kind of just I don't know. Depends on the son, I guess.
I do wonder why the diary ended up in this section of the family. There's theories that it was meant to go to Marianne. Sarah was writing letters back to Marianne, the eldest daughter. And then, of course, Marianne is very established in Iowa. But somehow it ended up in California. But Marianne did not come to California, maybe for a visit. That was it. So how did it end up with, I think, Libby, the second daughter?
I think so. Marianne died very young. I mean, if you look
Yeah.
at her, so she might have been dead almost by, well, maybe
Yeah.
not, but it was pretty close to. She didn't
Right.
live long.
Right. So
No.
do you pass it on to her or not? Or
Yeah.
did you go to her and then come back? I don't know how that worked out. But it ended up with Sarah Elizabeth, which is the
Mhm.
second born. And that's where I don't know how to say hail from. So I'm curious to hear a little bit about what you discovered about Albert. I have a partial crush on him because I know that's super weird because we're related, but I have a little crush on him because he goes into journalism and I did as well. So I feel a great deal of respect because he ended up managing an entire paper.
Right. And that's paper's still going. They had a 100-year anniversary. It might have been 10 or 15 years ago, and they sent the newspaper and they had a little article about him, and they called me and asked me questions, and it's because the newspaper's still going, or it was then. Yeah.
Wow. And then did his children also get into writing too?
No, I think my grandpa was interested in writing, but just did it as a hobby. He actually worked for the Chronicle too, my grandfather, but in a technical thing.
Oh, okay. So not writing.
Not writing. Yeah.
Right. So then your aunt was involved as a historian.
Yes. Albert's oldest son from a second marriage was Lovell, which was my grandfather, and he was named after that General Lovell Harrison.
Yes.
And then he had my Aunt Joanne, who was born I think in 21, and then my father Robert Lovell, his middle name was Lovell, so who was born in 25.
You know the story about the Lovells and how she almost married him?
No.
She was supposed to meet the general as a blind date of sorts, or he was supposed to meet her sister, which is, they looked a lot alike. To be fair, I've seen a picture and a painting. They looked a lot alike.
Are you talking about Sarah Jane?
Sarah Jane's sister. Yeah, he wanted to go meet her, but Sarah was there instead, and he was like, But Dr. James was with him.
Oh.
And so
because I think they were first cousins, weren't they?
Yeah. So he turned her down, but James was like, I don't know. So it's not like sloppy seconds, but it was just a nice little coincidence.
So, yeah, I think Albert's named after the sister's husband.
Yes. Yeah. They kept passing down the Miller name from Mr. Miller, who was a politician, etc., in Michigan, who the sister married. And then their cousin, William, named also the same, their father's name was William. So their cousin William also came and lived there. And William married the sister's daughter. So he's now like a cousin / uncle / nephew simultaneously in there. But maybe it was just a good fit. I don't know. They did those things back then.
Yeah, more convenient. Have you researched Lovell Harrison at all?
Lovell Harrison?
The general.
Yes. In many ways. I have an article out right now that's waiting to be published, all about the twists and turns of how Sarah met him, and then through a series of events. So she almost becomes the president's wife in this case. Just waiting for that to get approved. So I have to keep mum until then.
I like the story where he hit Grinnell on the head with a cane, and then got expelled from Congress. He got
he's a mouthy dude too.
And then the next year they voted him back into a seat.
I also have some good stuff that I'm waiting to get confirmation on their land, because it was taken over in Kentucky by the Confederate General Zollicoffer, where the Rousseaus, grandpa may or may not have been alive, but Dad Rousseau, Uncle Jack, and he was there, and he would have had to surrender his land. And there are so many pieces of property there, or homes or families, that claim to have been the headquarters. But which one really was, and does it even matter if he's taken over an entire area?
Right.
But I was looking into that because of the Battle of Mill Springs and such. And that's how I figured out that the cemetery, the family plot that was on the beach, as it has been described, that was washed away in a flood. So now the entire 3 or 4 generations of people, plus Mr. Daglish, being allowed to be buried in the family plot is just gone. We'll never know.
Yeah. My dad told me a story that he heard when he was a kid, that his great grandfather, before he got on the wagon train, they went and they witnessed a Civil War battle
Oh,
before they.
wow.
So I don't exactly know if there were any battles in Iowa or where that would be, but that that was a story in the family.
Right. Wasn't it like the bystanders would actually just go and
Oh
watch
yeah, the first,
sandwich?
like, I think like Bull Run outside of Washington, they brought sandwiches and picnics, and then it was like a bloody battle, and people were throwing it. It was just terrible.
Yeah.
So it was like not going to the theater.
Yeah. Really sad way. One of my favorite stories about the Rousseaus from the Rousseau side is on the plantation having that ladies' seminary or ladies' school. And it's almost a side story. So there was a gentleman that lived in the neighborhood, and he was the ferry operator. And so he would go up and down the river and collect all these ladies on Monday, and he would take them to school, and then he'd come back on Friday and deliver them back to their homes. And I just wonder if there was a little story just for this boy who gets to pick up all the pretty ladies and take them to their finishing school at Uncle Jack Rousseau's plantation. And
that was in Kentucky.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Huh. Oh, I never heard that before.
So it was a beachfront property, and so they could pull the ferry up and deliver them right to the school for the year, and they would stay fall to spring, where it was a winter school.
On the Mississippi, or which river?
Cumberland River.
Cumberland. Okay.
The one that flooded and then eventually wiped it everything.
Huh.
Have you seen a picture of it?
No, I haven't.
Oh, I have one picture, and it comes from the Thomas Kelly family, who did research more on the Canes. So Sarah Sally Kane married Uncle Jack Rousseau or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So she went through the Canes and the Kellys, and they went back in the 80s, and they were able to take a picture of the plantation. And I have this one picture from this super old document, and it's terrible quality, but since then everything's been destroyed. So it's the only one. Are you curious about reading the book? By the way, I'm just going to ask you, like,
yeah, definitely read it. How much time do you dedicate a week to writing it?
I typically get through a chapter a week, and then I revisit it right away.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's a good habit or bad habit, but I don't go forward until I chew on that one several times. So, but I do have preview readers that are helping me to stay on track.
Good for you. That's great. That's good. Well, this kind of inspires me to go into the big chest in the garage and dig up some of my grandmother's stuff and grandpa's stuff and see what's in there. Because I'm sure there's photographs and things like that. I know I do have one picture of Albert Miller and his wife in Alaska standing on their front porch.
That I have never seen. I would love to see what he looks like. I just imagine what he looks like.
Yeah. After that, he got married, I guess, in San Bernardio. That wife died. Then he went up to Washington, and then they went up to Alaska, during the gold rush, and then to the Yukon territory. And I have a picture of my grandfather delivering newspapers with dogs in the Yukon territory.
He might have been part of the Star Route.
I don't know, but he told my dad that he really hated that because it was like, cold as hell, and you have to go out first thing in the morning and deliver newspapers, and so.
Yeah. I did some research on what kind of mailman was Dr. Rousseau, because he was a doctor, he was a surveyor, and he was also a postman. So, was he also the baker and school bus driver?
I know.
But those are all heavy duty, large commitment jobs. I was like, how does he do this? And I guess the Star Route was this agreement with individuals who will go the extra mile outside of the county line.
Okay.
So he would circle around the outer limits. And I imagine maybe he treated people like that. He made his rounds and made his treatments. I don't know how you coordinate all of that.
I don't know. And then he became superintendent of schools, right? In San Bernardio. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was quite a jack of all trades.
I know. He jumped around. His brother Wesley, who after dad on the plantation died, Wesley took over and managed it. Wesley's family ended up coming here to Arizona, and they are, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes away from me. They have a farm, and they have been farming in the same location for 2 or 3 generations.
Really?
Yeah. So they also have their own wagon train story from several years later
Uh-huh.
coming down here. And so I'm really excited about that. But I know that when Dr. Rousseau was retired, he would come out and visit to Phoenix, and I couldn't figure out why, but he kept showing up at he was part of Masons.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a headmaster or something
Mm-hmm.
of one of the Phoenix locations. And I was like, that's so weird. He lives in California. But he would come and visit his brother, and they would have their things, and then he would go back, which is super cool too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's another this Albert Miller's wife, and her last name was Keys, Annie Keys. There's a book about her family because her parents came out from like 2 or 3 times back and forth across the United States, during that time. It's like crazy. And then I think my her great grandmother was in Washington when she got married, and then her sister came out from Oklahoma out to and then met one of my great grandfather's friends, and they married. And then this person who's the professor at the University of Missoula is doing a book on her, about her travels. So
okay.
So there's lots of connections.
Yeah.
I haven't spoken to the professor in Missoula. I just have known her from this woman that does the research. So.
Well, I'll have to send you the links to it, but I found 2. No, that's not true. More than 2 parallel accounts. And one of my favorites is have you heard of the Rijsdams, the Dutch people that were in Pella?
No.
They left at the same time, and they came from Holland, moved there, but Dr. Rousseau was there right about the same time. So they all were establishing the county and all of this, and they all left at the same time. And their journal is side by side with the Rousseaus multiple times, where they meet up and such. And so it's really cool to see like, the other person looking at the story.
Yeah.
So I'll send you that. And then Irving Merrill, his ancestor Julius Merrill, he's got a trail diary out there. Okay. They overlap in their tales of this giant attack. And so they're attacked multiple times, and horses are being robbed and such. And you see in Sarah's diary them in the midst of it, and you see in the Merrill's diary what's going on over there, and he's the witness to all the events. And so that's also super cool to see. Like, we can get outside the perspective, the one
right. And then that letter that Earp wrote about the getting attacked.
I love his spelling too.
I know, he was very educated, but that's another perspective.
I noticed he uses people's initials all the time, and that has got to be grating. That has got to be so irritating. I don't know who that person in my life is that would just be like, for me, my last name's Molony, JM. Hey, JM. Yeah. Like, my name is Janelle. Why are you doing that? It's so rude.
It's not any easier or shorter.
No, but I did track down the Capleys, or Capley, I don't know how to pronounce it. And I was able to find perhaps his buddy that he brought in as a teamster was perhaps avoiding the draft and such. And Charlie Capley, or Capley's father, was a Confederate who is now in Iowa. And so there's an interesting little subplot of Earp getting not only his boys out of the draft, but also, hurry up, come along with me, and I'll get them out for you, for a Confederate.
Is it true that he had to go and get Wyatt out of the army? I mean, I thought Wyatt went and joined up, and he went and pulled them out. I read that somewhere.
So Wyatt didn't go too far away. So he didn't really get outside of his father's knowledge. When we're kids, we think we're doing stuff, and mom and dad, they don't know. Yeah, they know.
Yeah.
So he was notified, and from what I understand, and was able to be like, no.
But the older ones were in the war, and one of them was hurt. Was that?
Yeah, one of them was injured, and I believe it's more pride and psychological than physical. In that time, he would be considered a cripple or invalid, or whatever those terms were. He was done, but he wasn't really done, because we know he goes on to do other things. So good for him.
Yeah. Got out of it. Well, it's interesting because I really don't know anything about the Kentucky Roosters. I think Joanne had some information about them, but I haven't really looked through it. So and they didn't really tell stories about that, that branch or that far back. So that'd be interesting for me to know about them more.
They come right in after Lewis and Clark go and start their exploration, and Daniel Boone's a part of the story and such. So the first wave of people come in right after Lewis and Clark, after they report back, yeah, it's livable conditions, and they get land grants. So then they were on a plantation that had a name. And now I'm drawing a blank, but this plantation had a name. And so they came in after the original people had settled there with the land grant, and then they sold. So they're like second generation for even having this county even exist.
Mm-hmm.
So they're very good friends with all of the people around. And I know Grandpa Jack had a twin, and the twin was a no good alcoholic. And so on top of the stories of Uncle Jack's really cool school and all this, there was his twin brother who was going around town and just in debt and demolishing reputation and just all of these things. And so when it came time to inherit and pass down, the older twin, who is the alcoholic, got passed by.
Mm-hmm.
He went to the responsible child.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole thing, and all the neighbors, including the family from the mill where Battle of Mill Springs is involved, even those family were like, no, we know he's a drunkard and his dad would never have granted him this land. And they all advocate for the younger twin to get the property and get rid of this guy.
Wow. Yeah.
He actually worked at the sawmill for a portion of time as well. They must have been able to cross that river willy-nilly, just like crossing the street.
Yeah.
And I believe that when James and Sarah moved to Iowa, they would have taken the Cumberland over to the Ohio and then over and up into the Des Moines. They would have been able to.
Do you have any idea why they moved?
They would have moved to Burlington after he graduated med school. And so he did his residency at a hospital or some kind of school or whatever it was in Burlington. And so he made a lot of connections there. And then from Burlington, then they moved to not Pella, but they moved to the Elk Grove Forest or something. So that would have been immediately after he graduated. Mary Ann was born, and then he went to Burlington for that first residency. And then there's several people in the diary that they reconnect with, that they're able to say, oh, that's so-and-so from when we lived in Burlington. And I think I don't know if they're a politician or something. I'll have to look it back up. But they do refer back to, we lived in Burlington for a while. We know these people from Burlington.
Interesting. And do you have any idea why they came to California?
Definitely because of her arthritis.
Okay. Because I've read accounts from the Earp side that it was because of the Emancipation Proclamation, but I don't know, maybe that had something to do with it. But
he can only speak for himself. Each family had their own motivation. And so her cousin, William, her cousin / uncle / nephew, whatever, he died of arthritis. And then it's possible that her father also died of arthritis. He didn't make it to old age or 60s even. So she would have been exposed to that gradual loss of life, loss of animation, loss of all of those things. So it was a very real threat for her to get somewhere to live. And I think that would have been a way to grasp at straws with that warm air treatment or dry air treatment.
Sure, yeah.
But ultimately didn't work. Not for her. I have a strong feeling that depression would have done its job in this process. I wonder if that was part of it, to just leave everything. Be in pain, know that this is your last chance, last option, and then get there and no one knows you. You have no reputation anymore. And you just hurt. You just heard all the time.
How long did she live in San Bernardino? How long did she last after the?
She only made it 4 years.
Only 4 years. Wow.
Yeah, just enough to
Wow.
nothing.
Yeah. Did James ever get remarried?
No, and he lived into his 90s.
Wow.
Which at the time you live till you're 60 and you're old.
Yeah, right.
90.
Wow.
One of my favorite characters, people, was this Mormon guard that joined them on the trail named Robert Clark. And in the story, he stops in Salt Lake or near Salt Lake for his family. His wife just had a kid. And then he decides, you know what? I'll escort you guys all the way to San Bernardino, which is super cool. He doesn't have to. I don't think he has to, because the trail guards are going back and forth between Council Bluffs and Utah. They're not operating in the same guard duty all the way to California. So then his wife dies and he moves out to San Bernardino and lives the rest of his life out as a neighbor to Mr. Rousseau.
Wow.
I'm so touched by that. And they become the greatest friends. He's a super science nerd in the diary. I mean, he picks up all these, like, there's a strange bird's body or a little rock or whatever. And so you see him collecting all these little geological nature things. And I just imagine that would have amused Dr. Rousseau a lot. They would have created a very strong bond. And it would have been great to have his buddy out after both of them had lost their wives. I wish I could meet someone from the Clark family too and just be like, what do you know about this guy? Because we just had this snippet of his life and the friendship became so powerful, just like that.
Yeah. Amazing. What else do you do?
I have authored another book. I wrote a memoir about my life. So that one's doing really well. That came out last year. And I also am researching my other grandmother. She spent 7 years in the Minnesota State Hospital for the Insane or Criminally Ill. And she was put there by her husband, who
wanted to get remarried.
Yeah, we know there was infidelity, but she may have had some hormonal issues, or she may have been depressed, like sort of normal things.
Right.
And it was too much for him to handle. So he had her admitted. She wasn't a inmate. She was a patient, but she kept a diary, and that is, I think, the next project.
Okay.
Playing with it. It's dark and it's sad, and it just to look back at this from today's perspective of mental health care, to go back to being put in a cage or being put in a boiling hot bath or you know, things like that. I just
how long was she in the facility?
6.5 years, but her sentence was 7 years.
Wow.
For being sad.
Yeah.
Or hysterical.
Hysterical, right. Hysterical.
Well, I'm so glad you could join me today for and to just, I don't know what the word is, geek out over really cool family history.
Oh, there's another family lore that that Sarah kind of really had a bad opinion of Earp and actually put more of the stuff in the diary, and then her daughter erased sections. Is that true, or?
I would have to
I don't know. That my grandmother told me that, but somebody told her that. So.
I do know that there are markings in margins and markings on fronts and backs of pages. But I don't know unless I could see if
it'd be kind of interesting to see if that's true. That if you know what she really thinks, if you could bring that back up, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, I know in the transcription there's several chunks where there's like a parentheses and it's like missing.
Yeah, so it could be. That would be great to bring that back up. I'm sure there's technology to be able to do that. That's probably the best parts.
Yeah, he was definitely uncouth, but it just makes for a better story at this point.
Yeah.
So I'm so excited that you have that background. So when you read the preview, you can be like, that's spot on, or hey, I think you missed something. I appreciate those.
No, I appreciate you doing this. I think it's great. It's really very cool.
Well, stay in touch, Kathleen. I'm
and I will, like I say, look through some stuff and ship stuff off to you when I see it. Talk again soon.
Yes.
Alrighty.
Agreed.
All right. Bye-bye.
Don't forget to check out the webpage at janellemolony.com/Rousseau, ROUSSEAU, and on social media at Rousseau Project, where we are discussing latest findings, articles, sharing photos of the family and things that we remember from them or things that we find in that box or in that folder from generations ago. So we're gathering together and preserving, digitizing our family history so that future generations will have easy access to that material.